Salutations! Today we have a video about a topic that's quite different from what I normally cover on this channel. Let me just go grab that MacGuffin real quick. Whoa, what? Oh hey, excuse me, can you tell me what's going on here? Wait, why are you pointing that at me? This is Halo 2's I Would Have Been Your Daddy's Skull, one of Halo's most infamous and elusive Easter eggs. While Halo 3's rendition of this skull was deciphered under a week after the game's launch, I don't think anyone has ever gone over the Halo 2 version of this skull scripts in full detail, or at least publicly anyway. That's what I intend to do with today's video. Since many of the players that are attempting Moist Critical's Deathless Lasso No Envy challenge are using the original Xbox version of the game, which requires you to manually collect each of the game's skulls unlike an MCC, I want to make understanding and obtaining the I Would Have Been Your Daddy's Skull way easier for those who are having trouble getting it. Before we get started with today's video, I'd like to announce that the VKMT Community Showcase is rapidly approaching. For those who are unaware, this is an opportunity for modders to have their modding projects showcased by us at VKMT. You'll need to have a trailer for your submission to count, and you can either make one yourself, or you can commission us to make the trailer for you. More details will be provided by the Community Showcase submission form in the video's description box. You'll have until August 15th to have your project submitted to us, and if your project is approved, we'll need that trailer by the 25th. I'll also provide a link to last year's showcase to get an idea of what this is all about. With all that said, let's begin. So what is the I Would Have Been Your Daddy's Skull? Upon picking up this skull, rare NPC dialogue that comes from the AI become much more common.
Do you do foot massages, Arbiter?
Arbiter? Tell me a story.
If I find out that you have X-ray vision, you're dead.
Collecting the skull in Halo 3 is pretty easy. On normal or higher, regardless if you're playing solo or co-op, start the Covenant level from the beginning and make your way to the Citadel. After triggering the cutscene with Truth's death, clear out all the enemies, then jump through each of the holographic Halo rings in this order. Doing this will spawn the skull at the end of the light bridge towards the cutscene trigger. The Halo 2 method, on the other hand, is extremely annoying. Before attempting this, I highly recommend creating a separate profile specifically for the purpose of collecting the skull. I'll explain why a bit later. You'll have to boot up Outskirts on Legendary by yourself, no co-op. You then have to make your way to the Sniper Alley trigger, then continue through this part of the level until you reach this house, and the skull should appear, right? Well, unfortunately, there's a third check that the game looks for when determining to spawn the skull. The game uses a random number generator and looks if the number 0 is selected. If 0 is picked, then the I Would Have Been Your Daddy's Skull will spawn when you approach the spawn room. I'll proceed to debunk two myths when it comes to getting the skull to spawn. First, there is no 100% guaranteed method for this to appear. Anyone who tells you this is either lying or simply doesn't know. However, there's a way to repeatedly roll for the number 0 to be selected without having to restart the level, using a famous method called Force Spawn, which was created by a Halo 2 veteran named Grumpy. Before you get to the Sniper Alley trigger, attempt to get a checkpoint. Once you have gotten said checkpoint, trigger Sniper Alley and make your way to the skull room while repeatedly pressing the melee button. Having your character use melee attacks will prevent Halo 2 from giving you another checkpoint because it thinks you're unsafe in the middle of combat. The reason we're doing this is because it's specifically the Sniper Alley encounter that wakes the skull scripts. If you make it to the skull room and it turns out the skull didn't spawn, simply revert to last checkpoint and try again. However, if you happen to get a checkpoint after triggering Sniper Alley, you have to restart the level. The skull script checks if you have reverted to last save, and if you did, the skull will refuse to spawn. This works because, again, the script for the I Would Have Been Your Daddy's Skull isn't activated until you make it to the Sniper Alley trigger, which encompasses this zone here. You can either hit it through the intended path on the floor below, or if you're on the rooftops, there's a small section you can hit to trigger it, and you can tell when you successfully passed it when this Jackal Sniper spawns. I recommend doing different things in between spawn attempts to get a different seed, which will make it more likely for you to get the number 0 after a few tries. I modified the script to have debug text play when the script successfully selects 0. The other myth that was pretty common back in the day is the requirement of triggering 7 checkpoints before going to the skull room. This is also incorrect, as again, the only 3 requirements are legendary, solo, and the random number generator selecting 0. However, checkpoints are in fact a part of the skull spawn method. In order for the skull to appear, the player has to be within this trigger volume by the skull room, but you also have to wait a few moments for the game to attempt to give you a checkpoint. This is why you'll sometimes see the skull just appear out of thin air when standing inside the room for a couple of seconds. Okay, so now you have gotten the skull to spawn, but because you're going for Lasso No Envy attempts on the original Xbox version, do you really have to go through the rigors of getting this to spawn every time you boot up your copy of Halo 2? Nope. There's an exploit you can use to keep this skull spawned forever and ever. Remember when I said to have a specific profile for the sole purpose of getting this skull? The original Xbox version of Halo 2 doesn't require you to stay on the same profile to gain the effects of the various skulls found in the game. One profile can find a skull, then the effects for that skull will apply to every profile that's saved on your Xbox until you dashboard or turn off your console. To keep the I Would Have Been Your Daddy skull spawned, do not pick it up, and proceed to continue on until you gain another checkpoint. The checkpoint cannot be in the skull room. Once you get the checkpoint, you're free to save and quit the game. When you return to this save, you can go back to the skull room to see that the I Would Have Been Your Daddy skull is still there. Now we can finally pick up this skull and hear elites asking for foot massages. Oh, of course getting the effects of this skull isn't as simple as picking it up. Due to the turbulent nature of Halo 2's development, Bungie's mission designers became a sadistic group of people, and wanted the player to survive a gauntlet of 28 legendary Ultra Elites while starting off with just a plasma pistol, before you finally gain the effects of this skull. Before attempting this challenge, I recommend stocking up on battle rifle ammo by throwing a bunch of BRs inside the arena. There's a trigger volume that extends throughout this area of Encounter 5 that acts as a boundary for the arena. Attempting to step outside of the boundary will teleport you back to the middle of the arena. You cannot escape until either you kill all the elites or die trying. You can use this to your advantage, however. When you're teleported back to the arena, you're always given a fresh plasma pistol at 100% battery. When running out of batteries for your plasma pistol, simply run to the edge of the arena, and along with utilizing your BR ammo cache, you're ready to continue noob comboing these elites. There are 7 waves total during this gauntlet, starting with 1 elite in wave 1, 2 in wave 2, 3 in wave 3, and so on. There are 7 unique elites, each using a different loadout. I'll call these elites the guys. There's Plasma Rifle Guy, Needler Guy, Needler Gang, Plasma Rifle and Needler Guy, Plasma Rifle and SMG Guy, Battle Rifle Guy, Energy Sword Guy, and the worst one of them all, Beam Rifle Guy. It's Beam Rifle Guy that makes this gauntlet one of the hardest single player challenges in the Halo series. Imagine a Halo 2 Jackal Sniper, but he required the 7 Super Emeralds to become Hyper Sniper. That's Beam Rifle Guy, and he's a bastard that can one-shot you while you have to finesse to kill him. You could turn any of the guys into an Energy Sword Guy if you get close to them and brandish a weapon with a high enough scariness value to force them into a berserk state. When going for more ammo, try to leave an Energy Sword Guy alive so you're not killed from a distance. It's kind of like leaving a crawler alive in COD Zombies in between waves. I also recommend you keeping the high ground when taking on the elites. You don't want to be on the ground floor, lest you'd like to get shredded by multiple elites in less than a second. Once you have killed all 28 of the elites, you'll finally obtain the effects of the I Would Have Been Your Daddy skull. But what if I told you, you didn't actually have to fight the elites at all? This leads us to our second exploit. Before attempting this, get the Sputnik skull. Once you have that, ensure the I Would Have Been Your Daddy skull has spawned, but don't pick it up. Instead, backtrack and get the blind skull. If you want to not have the effects of the blind skull on while doing this, get another checkpoint, save and quit the game while still holding the blind skull, restart Halo 2, get Sputnik on a different profile, again, on a different profile, then load up your outskirts save. You'll have the blind skull in your hands, but without its HUD removing effect. The reason that when you pick up the blind skull and it's not giving you the blind skull effect is because you have to be within this trigger volume to actually have the blind skull effects activate. With the blind skull in hand, make sure you have some grenades and make your way past Hotel Zanzibar and head right. Grenade jump to this point, then to this point, and run along the highway. You can walk on an invisible walkway all the way to the end. Then, staying on the right hand side of this area, hug the wall. And once you're close enough to the corner, slow down your movements until this happens. The hell is happening here, you must be thinking. We're essentially forcing the game to give us the I would have been your daddy's skull without going through the elite gauntlet, and here's how it works. In order for the gauntlet to begin, the player has to be holding a skull inside the trigger volume that encompasses this house. However, keep in mind I said a skull, not the I would have been your daddy's skull. The script checks if the player is holding the oddball while being inside the box before triggering the elite fight. Because this script wasn't specific enough, this is why the exploit works with the blind skull. Okay, but why the hell are we all the way out here to trigger this glitch? Halo's levels are segmented through a process called binary space partitioning, or BSP for short. To simply explain this allows parts of a mission to be loaded and unloaded depending on where the player is, allowing for optimal in-game performance. Why bother having the entire level loaded all at once when you don't need it to be? Halo takes these sections of the map and places them in scenario structure BSP tags. So when you hear someone say they're inside a certain BSP, they're referring to the scenario structure BSP. The important part for our exploit though is that regardless of what BSP you have loaded, all of the level's trigger volumes are always active unless scripted to be turned off via the command kill volume disable. This command isn't used at all on Outskirts, meaning every trigger volume is constantly active. The volume for the I would have been your daddy's skull room just so happens to have a small corner extend out of the wall here while we have the beach BSP loaded. So when we take the blind skull to this spot, this tomfoolery starts. What's going on here is that the game is trying to teleport you to the arena, but it's in a BSP that isn't currently loaded. At the same time, the game's also trying, and failing, to spawn the 28 elites, and after a while, the game gives up and just hands you the effects of the skull. This is optional, but I recommend resetting this until you're able to get a checkpoint while under the effects of this exploit. That way, when you come back and load this save, you'll already be inside the glitch, and you can have the effects for the I would have been your daddy's skull pretty much immediately. And that's everything there is to know about Halo 2's I would have been your daddy's skull. If, and only if, you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, leave a comment on your experiences relating to this skull if you have any, and subscribe for more Halo content from this channel. I'd like to thank my Singhili Zealots, as well as counselors Andy, Broly Martinez, Conlor Daytona, C3 Sabretooth, Jarrah Sunder, Joshua Fisher, Just Larm, Kyle Dealman, Rad Mayan, Scatman, Sean T, Synonymous Hooligan, The Cave Potato, and UNSC Shooter. This is the Vengeful Vadam. Always remember that you matter more than you think you do, and I'll see you on the great journey.